Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be back. Welcome to GSA's European Executive Forum. It's a pleasure to be back. Although I've heard only half of you have been here last year, it looks like many of you have been here last year too. So, as you've seen, our products, our innovation, our industry enables a great future, a bright future. It tackles major challenges of society by providing solutions that are more energy efficient, that are easier to use, and that are safe. Now, this is actually then the effects that we generate, the reasons, the base for the growth of our industry. It provides not only good for the society, but also provides great growth opportunities for all of us in this room. And as we say, we are the link between the real world and the digital world. In order to create this link, it is crucial that we at first create a link between people like you around this room, to make sure that we create the future of this industry in a bright way. And what other place could we do this as this place at the GSA Forum today? So thank you for being with us here today. Now, last year when I was here, I was talking about how bright the future looked. We just had finished 2017 and the prospects for growth in 2018 were phenomenal. This year, slightly different. Looking at the first chart, you're all familiar with it. Last year came in at 12% growth. This year's prospect is at -7. Cyclicality of our industry happens again. Some people, at least in our company, said, oh, cyclicality is over, structural growth is overdriving it all. Not quite true. Now, nevertheless, the good news is that this is supposed to be a short period. 1 year should be enough, and then we go back to growth again. Well, let's take a look at that. Where does the decline in 2019 come from? Well, after 2 years of major growth, no wonder that we actually contract, the market contracts a little bit. One could say boom is over, and looking at this into more detail, you'll find out that double-digit declines this year, at least in first quarter, came from DRAM, NAND, general purpose MPUs, 32-bit MCUs, analog and ASICs. Significantly, the price decline in the DRAM market was tremendous. Now, all of these segments basically are facing inventory oversupply and some softening of demand. That also has put some pressure on all of our other segments, but most of the other segments are not declining significantly, or at least not double digit, and some continue to grow, nevertheless at much lower pace. And as we all know, when the boom is over, there's a little bit of a hangover. Emotionally, it doesn't feel as good, but nevertheless, structurally and fundamentally, our business is still set for growth, and we'll talk about that later. So, cyclicality of our industry is nothing unusual. Looking 20 years back and a little bit into the future, you can see that whenever there was a significant pressure on GDP, there also was a substantial pressure on market. That's a pretty busy chart. You look at the left side, you see GDP growth, and that is, I don't know what color, ocean, I think is what we call this. This color is GDP versus semiconductor growth, obviously, to the right scale, significantly enlarged in terms of magnitude. Two things I want to mention on this slide in addition. Number one, usually no substantial decline happened when the market or the GDP growth was roughly at 3% or slightly below. And secondly, forecast for current year as well as the years to come is still okay. Let's say roughly slightly below 3%. That should be good for some growth. Nevertheless, how much of, I'd say, trade tensions overall I'd say, loss in faith of our economic growth is already factored into these 2.8% is not so clear. But what I think is very clear is that this 3% according to WSTS or 7.4% according to IHS decline in 2019 is to be attributed to the two boom years that we had in the years before and structurally driven substantially by the decline in DRAM market. I think the semiconductor industry, that's very important to mention, is a global industry, as we all know. We all rely on open and free markets. We can barely afford to develop individual products for sub-regions. We need to jointly fight for making sure that regulators understand implications of substantial let's say, free trade barriers in our industry. And we have this discussion later this afternoon with Wally heading it on dramatically changing environment, and so therefore I'll save some of the comments for later. I'm sure that's going to be one of the topics that we will be discussing today. What is happening? What can we do about it? But frankly speaking, this year's decline is not to be attributed to these effects. What we face right now is the natural cyclicality of our industry and is not so much attributed to the minor reduction in growth on GDP that's projected. So there's a lot at stake politically and for us in particular in our industry, but what we're facing right now is a correction that is then going to be hopefully and naturally compensated by structural growth drivers, because my discussion today is predominantly about growth in mid and long term of our industry. Digitalization offers tremendous amount of opportunity for all of us. We, however, need to understand where we are, how quickly things are going to be developing, and how relevant it's going to be after all. And one potential way to describe it is with the well-known hype cycle, where usually there's a peak of inflated expectations followed by some disillusionment and certainly a plateau of productivity at the end. And the big question is, any of those wonderful things that you have seen in this video today, where are they yet? How quickly are they going to move forward? And how high are they going to end in this wonderful plateau after all? And I think this conference is all about understanding this by maybe two big themes. First theme is all about artificial intelligence. I think right after my speech we're jointly jumping right into this very big topic. Obviously artificial intelligence is a big promise. It has potential to go across pretty much all sectors, be it agriculture, be it home, be it industrial, or automotive. It will be used everywhere. The question is, how much value can it create, and how significant is the contribution that we can bring? We'll jump into that a little bit later and hear about it more. The second one is autonomous driving. I've chosen autonomous driving in this case. Obviously on level 4, we're probably heading into the disillusionment. That's a slide from August. I think the data is from August 18, yes. So maybe we're even a little bit further ahead. But as you can see, any of this is not moving so super fast. It's like 10 years as typical in automotive. And yes, it is, especially when it comes to level 5, connected to 5G. We'll come to that also in a moment, how and why. But certainly level 5 is just building expectation or continues to build expectation. And why is that? Just a few figures. If you think of assisted driving systems, level 2 is already there. It provides, let's say, predominantly serves this so-called vision zero, so zero fatal or major accidents in vehicles. And that's already in cars today, in mass cars today. I think the projected figures are 6 million at roughly $160 in 2020. That's the latest market figure on this. Whereas when you look at level 3, which is the next level, so hands off at times, we're looking at 3 million vehicles, $630 in 2025. And last but not least, the promise of level 5, once we're all the way there, says 4 million vehicles, $970 average in 2030. So that's why there is, of course, a lot of expectation, a big hype about level 5. And we'll also talk about that in a second. So these two examples I've basically picked, and if you look at the original data from Gartner, there's plenty more alternatives, but I've picked those two because they are the major themes of this conference today, and they're both very, and tomorrow, they're both very relevant to our market. So talking a little bit about artificial intelligence. As I already said, it's universal. It goes across many, many industries. It requires energy-efficient hardware, super high bandwidth, high performance computing, and I think there is a keynote later today on this very topic specifically. And of course, it requires tons of data. Artificial intelligence is applied to a lot of data. And therefore, frugal, human-friendly AI for smart sensors, I think, is another very interesting speech later today as well. How do we make sure that we create this data in a human way, that we actually use it in an appropriate way? Of course, it doesn't only provide a lot of opportunity, there is plenty of challenges at the same time. It's all about data availability and usability, or in particular in Germany or in Europe, how about data ownership? How do we tackle the challenge of data ownership? Another opportunity, but at the same time challenge for Europe, is application-oriented research. AI only works when you have a good question to begin with, the data to analyze it, and last but not least, a person who can read the result and turn that into business opportunity. AI can lift a lot of value, but it requires substantial understanding. And last but not least, digitalization and artificial intelligence is meant to serve people, not the other way around. We've got to make sure that when we introduce artificial intelligence, it's being used for the right purposes, with the right intent. And I think today's discussion will hopefully also reveal some of those topics. Next topic, basically focus of the day tomorrow, is mobility. Electric, connected, autonomous, and secure mobility. Global warming is a reality. CO2 emission targets are a reality in response to that. Paris 2050 is a reality. Debating about those CO2 targets is a discussion after the fact. At the same time, electric mobility provides substantial opportunity for the semiconductor industry, as what was combustion mechanic becomes electronic. Obviously, silicon carbide and gallium nitride provide additional new technology opportunities in this space. However, silicon will remain mainstream for the time being. Big challenge in this industry is that consumer expectations are that you get the same functionality at the same price of the electric vehicles as you get it today. That is particularly a cost performance challenge for the industry, but not only that. Obviously, batteries do not store as much energy as tanks do at the same weight in particular. And so I'd say it's a challenge on both sides, on the vehicle itself, as well as on the charging infrastructure. And charging infrastructure is not necessarily an easy business case. So typically, governments have to get involved in providing infrastructure changes as well. Now, when you look at connected, autonomous, and secure mobility, the cars will become part of the Internet of Things. In 2025, 100 million vehicles will be somehow connected to the web, and there's going to be keynotes later, I think by ST as well as by on the opportunities that provides to semiconductor makers alone. Of course, there also is an IT security challenge, safe over-the-air updates of software in the car is everything but simple. And then there's going to be a keynote, I think, by my dear colleague from Infineon, challenge for safe and secure AI in automotive later as well. So challenges are manifold. 5G, for instance, and 5G implementation. I just want to make one thing clear. I do not believe that the vehicle will rely its safe operation on 5G. It will have safe mode operation in the vehicle standalone as well. It requires cross-value chain operation. One of the reasons I believe why we need to have more exchange with the car industry, but also with the IT and telecom industry that I think, in my view, has been lost a little bit over the past years. We need system competencies, we need norms, we need standards, and we need legal frameworks. All of that is necessary to drive what people want, and that is basically three things. Number one, as I already said, vision zero, no fatalities. Number two, it is a business case driven by commercial use of vehicle. Robo-taxis as one thing, but don't forget that the supply chain of goods in the retail industry is becoming more and more delivery industry rather than individual pickup. And last but not least, we all want the individual freedom to not be bothered by driving around, but want the vehicle to drive us as well. And last but not least, this will also enable then smart mobility concepts like automated parking find, etc., etc. So, huge potential in this, but major challenges at the same time. So, already coming towards the end. We are in a cycle. The cycle is so far nothing special. After 2 years of boom, by the way, a pretty long period of very high growth rates in the industry, no wonder that it comes down at some point in time. So far, all we see is inventory corrections, but no substantial GDP threat. However, it exists, and we'll talk about that later in this afternoon. We have substantial amount of structural growth drivers in our industry, providing lots of opportunities, short, mid, and long term, to counter the decline in this year, to deliver on the promise of continued growth in our industry. However, we need to understand where we are. We need to be looking and seeing through some of these false promises that are made in the very early part of the hype cycle and understand which of these industries are really going to deliver the value and thus growth to our industry. And AI is one of them, for sure. However, manifold, very difficult to see through, so I'm looking forward to understanding more today. And last but not least, same is true for automotive, where there I believe it is much more transparent where it's going to go. Challenges there are a little bit more on the timing, at what time can what be realized. So therefore, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's create this bright future together. Let's make sure that we are not only part of today, but that we also create tomorrow so we can be part of tomorrow as well. Thank you very much and enjoy the show.